Dennis.
If you do, let me know. I don't get 100%.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to our commission meeting. We will have an invocation offered by Commissioner Brady, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Lord, we give you thanks for our citizens who have placed their trust in us, and we ask for courage and wisdom to be good stewards of both their trust and their resources. Help us in the midst of difficult decisions to have peace of mind, trust in your guidance, and look toward the long-term goals of all whom we serve. Finally, we give you thanks for this city and ask that you might so guide us in our decisions that we might continue to serve you and the world through the work you have given us to do. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Professor, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Brady?
Here.
Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Mr. Lockhart?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Poole?
Here.
Ms. Lloyd? Here. Ms. Twine? Here.
Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting on February 26, 2018. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the February 26th meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
And a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Audience participation, anyone wishing to address the commission regarding any of our regular agenda items, please step to the microphone, give us your name and your thoughts or questions, and we will endeavor to answer those questions as the topics come up or the individual pieces of legislation.
Sharon Johnson, 1139 Fifth Street.
Might wait for me to finish speaking, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Mrs. Johnson.
I really want to jump the gun here. You tonight you have a legislation to spend $39,000 for an art consultant. And I really got confused over this whole thing because it's divided up into two parts. The ordinance was for an art program, but divided up into two parts with two different names on it, two different accounts, and two amount costs. The first one is Public Art and Culture Art Acquisition Fund, costing $42,500 coming out of the general fund, and Planning Public Art and Special Projects, costing $45,000 coming from a subcategory of Issue 8 Infrastructure. So the total yearly take on this is $87,500 of tax dollars going into art. I would like to know what the difference is between the two art programs and what are the functions of the two programs and what kind of art does the city have in mind? Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else wishing to address the commission on our regular agenda items?
Hi, Dan Dellahunt, 1025 Cedar Point Road. I'd like to speak to issue 3 tonight about the SID in downtown Sandusky. Do I wait until it's presented? I'm not sure how many questions I'll have after you hear your presentation.
This is the time to speak to the issue.
Okay. The property owners, as I understand it, have not been given the petition that you, the commission, will be looking at tonight. I did get a copy of it, and I have a number of questions about it. It seems like sometimes we have great programs that you like to kind of enhance a little bit. We had somebody was cleaning the streets for Sandusky a couple of years ago, and I think we spent through Main Streets about $9,100 a year for that program, and it seemed to be working pretty well. And now we're looking at doing a program to assess the property owners in downtown that will generate about $128,000. My questions, I guess, revolve around at how do we get to the majority of 60%. To pass that and to have it become a law. So as I understand it, the vote will be taken for those affected by linear feet. Is that true? Do I have these answers for you?
We'll answer your questions during.
Oh, okay. So whether it's linear feet or square feet, and I guess the parks, Sandusky's parks, Jackson Street Pier, Shoreline Park is all going to be included in those front footages, and as I understand, it's based on your front footage. In the packet of information that I think you have, the petition, they talk about the appraised value or the full market value of the property, and the county charges taxes on the taxable value, which is 35% of the appraised value. The way that the ordinance reads, or what your petition reads, is that it's based on full market value, and I don't know if that's a mistake or if that's actually how you're going to impose the tax. The next question is, when you're figuring out the tax, there's a page here that talks about how it'll be assessed in the different years. And let's just take residential property. It says year one, it'll be assessed by 0.001575 of the parcel's total market value, 0.001575% of the total market value. So I'm not sure if that's a mistake or if that's actually the way you're going to do it, because first of all, it's total market value as opposed to the taxable market value. And the second thing, I'm not sure that you wanted percentage sign behind the 0.001575. If you do, there's two more decimal places, and I'd be more than happy to pay $2.32 a year for my assessment as opposed to $232. So I don't know which is correct on that. There seems to be a lot of things wrong, and I'm not going to take any more time. But with this petition that I see, it seems the cart is before the horse in asking the commission to approve this and then go to the property owners to see if they're interested in it, and then go from that standpoint. It seems to me you should find out if the property owners are interested first, and then vote as a commission as to whether you want to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon.
Catherine Carter, 5309 Columbus Avenue. There's a gentleman, I believe, lives on Kelly's Island. He does stone sculptures and metal sculptures. And I thought you could create a portfolio of each quarter of Washington Park, take it over to Kelly's Island. He can't be hard to find there. And look at his sculptures and see if he has anything over there that would be considered for the park. Work a deal with him to donate his sculptures to the city for June, July, and August. They can come over here, they get set up in the park where you'd like them. They have a little plaque with them, the description, what their title is, and a phone number that you could call if someone's interested in buying one. Then at the end of the year, anyone through the summertime could come down to the park and see them and enjoy them when they're for the art walk and for the gazebo concerts. After Labor Day weekend, what's there, it hasn't been bought, goes back to him. Now you have just created Washington Park Gallery, and you could find a different artist every summer that would go in there for 3 months, or in the wintertime also. You would have...
Ms. Carter, if I may, with all due respect, which agenda item are you addressing?
The Art Council. It amazes me how many communities in this area have so many volunteers that help with gardens and parks and everything for raising money for projects for the city and taking care of the city. A lot of people from many walks of life have the knowledge to create an art council, a place where anyone could submit ideas to at least be considered for art for the city, temporary or permanent, from people from the city, from people from the county. To pay a company to come here to tell you how and what to choose as art and where to put it is ridiculous. That money for them could be used for the art. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Anyone else wishing to address the commission on any agenda items? If not, then we have a couple of presentations tonight. Tiffany Taylor with us, who is our GIS coordinator, and she's going to give us a review of the program over the last year.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the commission. In this past year, we have published to ArcGIS Online 132 individual feature layers, 75 maps, 30 web apps, and 14 Survey 123 surveys. All of this goes to ArcGIS Online, where it's available to all of our employees through the internet. We have also presented to state officials during the State of the State Week. We presented at the Ohio GIS Conference in Columbus, and our public tree inventory web map was accepted into the Ohio chapter ERISA's online map gallery. Of particular note this past year has been the use of Survey 123. It has been used across all different departments of the city for various purposes, such as the flushing and daily records like the pothole survey, sweeping log, alleys, snowplow driver log, City of Sandusky leaf pickup, the downtown Sandusky grocery survey, as well as the Pride Awards voting, the Bicentennial parade survey, and most recently the backflow field survey. Basically what all of these do is they take our paper forms that our guys were either filling out in the office or in the field, and it allows them to access it via their phone or a tablet and fill it out directly in the field. So we're collecting all of this data, but what are we doing with it? All of this data is stored in what are called feature layers. All of this data goes back to a central location, and we can pull all of the statistics from it and display it in dashboards like this for all of our management and for all of our upper level personnel to make decisions. The tree inventory was the one before. This is the utility management view, and you can see it takes all of the data from those point clouds, which essentially look like Excel files, and turns them into something that you can actually view and use to make management decisions either in the field or in the office. In addition, they allow us to correspond with the public and to receive public input. For example, with the Cardinal Grocery survey where they were closing, we sent out this public survey that members of the city could fill out. And it breaks all of this data down so that we can look at it. Our planning and zoning departments can say, okay, these are what our citizens are interested in getting at their grocery store in the local community. And they can start to ask questions, like how often do they go grocery shopping? For this particular survey with the respondents, it was around 212 of them, and they go out shopping once to twice a week. That prompts more questions. How are they getting there? So we can see. The majority of them are driving, but there's a good portion that walk and that also take the bus. So we can start looking into more in-depth questions and start drilling down through the data to help make the best decisions for the community. In particular, I'd like to recognize the Public Works Department. Director Klein and his team have been instrumental in getting the GIS up and running, and they are also the largest user within the city currently, as far as the bulk of data. So we have, for them right now, over the past year, we've been collecting meters, where you can see at the table to the side, all of the data stored in each point. So these are all the meters for the city that we have collected so far. We have valves with all of their associated data. We have manholes that we're starting to go through with the sewer department that are also collecting the same data. And we also have the streets department, which just recently this year really dove into using the GIS. So these are all of your traffic lights, traffic signals, control boxes, street lights, all of those things that the streets department needs to manage. All of this helps us with EPA compliance, as well as keeping track of our assets for asset management. So it's really powerful and really useful for not only the field guys, but management. Down at the bottom here, you can see a few of the surveys that the engineering department utilizes, like the backflow field survey, Big Island Waterworks asset inventory, the flushing forms, and SWIP construction inspections. So moving forward through this year, we're going to continue training across departments, both for management personnel and for field staff. We're going to continue collecting data for asset management and EPA compliance, like I mentioned. We're going to expand Survey 123, collector, and dashboard applications, all of which were included in this survey. And we're also going to increase the use of ArcGIS day-to-day amongst management to help them make those decisions and be able to see the big picture of what's going on in the field. And that concludes the 2017 year in review.
Well, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, in my off-commission meeting that we have in engineering, which happened last Monday, I had an opportunity to talk with our engineer and a couple of our staff, and they are so optimistic that the GIS program will, and has already begun to play a significant role in tracking work orders. And the ultimate question we all end up asking is, how does all this serve our residents? Or how does this make for a better community? Well, in engineering, we can tell you how, because now we know where the complaints come from, where the work orders are flowing to, how long it takes us to get to them. They don't get lost anymore. They don't get put on the back of a napkin, get dropped out of a truck. They're posted so everyone can see them, from the entry-level employee to the department head. So we have found a way, Engineer Klein has found a way to make use of this system, and I think our other departments will find that way also if they haven't already. So I'm very optimistic and thankful for your efforts in this.
Ms. Taylor, may I ask you this question? Would you say that the GIS at this point and going forward is more instrumental in providing better services, or more instrumental in being more efficient in the way we go about providing the services?
Mr. Commission President, I believe that it drives us towards both.
Okay.
It allows the guys to keep track of what they're doing, and it allows the management to also keep track of what they're doing, when they're doing it, where they're doing it.
All right, thank you. I find it all fascinating. I know you gave us just a surface level view, but I, for one, would be appreciative of the opportunity to take a deeper dig into it at various points in time when you've got the kind of reports that, that the department heads are using, or maybe Mr. Whoopster is using, and send those out just so that we see it. I don't want to second guess what anybody's doing. I just want to understand how it is we're making decisions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners, comments? Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Next, we have Amanda Golden, who is the managing principal of Designing Local, here to talk about item number 4, which is our public art master plan.
Thank you very much. As you said, my name is Amanda Golden with Designing Local, and I'm the managing principal of Designing Local, and we are a cultural planning firm out of Columbus. We focus on historic preservation and culture in cities, and how to build infrastructure to support funding, and also to support the longevity of arts and culture in our cities. So what is public art? Public art, when we ask this question, we usually get an answer. It's a monument. It's a monument to men who spent time at war with horses and in armor. We also cause people to ask deeper questions about what public art can do. And public art can change things from being mundane to interesting. This is the back of a garage in Tacoma, Washington, that was formerly stucco, and now is something that's exciting and interesting to park at. Public art is also unexpected. I don't know about you, but if I were to see this in a public plaza, I would want to go touch those rabbits to see if the form gives back against my pressure of my hand. Or I would also want to take my picture in front of them or take a selfie with them. They're exciting, they're fun, they're unexpected. I'm sure all of you have seen this sculpture in Columbus. I can't tell you how many times I've driven over that bridge and seen people lined up to take their photograph with these deer by Terry Allen. Right now, that deer has a scarf and hat on, so you know he's well loved. And in any pictures of Columbus, you'll often see that deer. He's become quite the icon for the city. The city utilized their river and their water, as well as their bridge, to draw people down to the riverfront and to spend time thinking and enjoying. Public art can also be functional. This is a San Jose airport, and this is a wrap around their parking garage, and those hands wave. It's right when the arrivals and the departure, so the hands are just constantly waving at people who are coming and going. Pittsburgh has a functional bike rack program in which they hired 20 artists to develop 20 different designs for public art, and then they purchased 2 pieces and placed them all around the city. And then public art can also increase safety and enhance aesthetics. This is in Birmingham, Alabama. What was once an underpass that had many problems associated with it has now become a place and a destination for photographs. If this photo is a little bit more pulled out, you see this girl has her dog on a leash in front of this column. And you can go online and you can see a lot of these photos are becoming part of the fabric of these communities. So why does public art matter in Sandusky? I think that's the question that many of our public speakers were asking before. It matters because public art can create unexpectedness. This is in an alleyway in Montpelier, Vermont. An artist decided to paint monkeys who were climbing across the buildings. It also creates interesting spaces. It creates a reason for people to want to go stand in between your buildings. If I were to see this, I would want to stand under the ball and again, have my picture taken and share that on social media. But most importantly, what public art has the power to do in Sandusky is to really express who the community believes that they are, and to really draw people into the city and to spend more money in your city. So enter the Sandusky Public Art Master Plan. We are going to spend the next 6 to 7 months with your residents, with you, asking you who you hope Sandusky becomes, what kind of expressions and community value statements you want to be expressed through your public art. And we're going to think about how we can make that happen. So there are going to be some conceptual projects and programs, yes, to fund, but there will also be policy direction that establishes a sound program. When you're spending money on a plan, you're doing it so that you can be fiscally responsible in the future. And adopting a plan and going through a planning process at the very beginning ensures that that happens. So a maintenance policy will come out of the planning process. A gifting policy. How do you understand what is a good asset to take on versus a bad asset when people are offering to donate public art to your city? What kind of things need to come with this gift? Does there need to be an endowment for maintenance? Who will take care of it? There will also be some funding opportunities that will happen. You adopted a really fantastic piece of legislation just before Christmas, I believe, to establish a funding mechanism for public art. You are one of the leaders in Ohio who has done that, so congratulations, it's a big deal. And this plan will take it a step further and say, how else can we fund these opportunities? The plan will also act as an opportunity to fund public art outside of that legislation. So many communities who have done planning processes are able to say to large foundations, to the federal government, hey, we've spent time thinking about and planning about and caring about our future as it pertains to public art, and we want to apply for these grants. And by doing this plan, you're able to apply for these grants. So we'll spend a lot of time with the public and with different stakeholders asking them what they want to see, and we'll take the trends and best practices in public art planning and in public art as a whole, as well as some local solutions to what your community wants to determine what those best practices are for Sandusky. And then by August, September or October, we'll have a master plan to come back before you so that you can say, yes, this is what the community said they wanted. We believe that this supports those desires and those recommendations. And then at that point, we would hope that you would adopt the master plan. And I believe I kept it under 5 minutes. And I know you'll have questions, both now and possibly in the next few minutes as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
I wonder if Ms. Bonington might be able to answer this question that was posed by Ms. Johnson regarding the dollars that we're spending. I would certainly be in favor of spending $85,000, but I fear that we're not doing that. I think we're really spending the 1% of 1%.
Through you, Mr. President. Yes, you're correct, Commissioner Brady. There's not two separate funding sources for art. So there is the percent for public art, the 1% that you had spoke to, which is what we're using to fund this contract and future art projects. The other account that was mentioned is in regard to special projects and planning. And if art was mentioned in that during any process, it's not intended to be used for art. The fund that we're using for this is going to be used for art moving forward.
Darn.
I know you want to spend more. Additional questions or comments, Commissioners? There was a question posed about what kind of art does Sandusky want?
Yes.
And I'd like to ask your understanding of how to answer that question. But I think the answer is that's what we're about to find out.
It's true.
And so we don't really have anything planned at this point in
Right.
time.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Poole.
what is would you go through what the process is that
Sure.
you're going to get this information of what we want?
Let's see if I can.
Tell me what I'm going to be looking at.
I can't get it to go back, but so we will start the process in April. And that process is really about discovering who Sandusky is. So we'll be asking different stakeholders to meet with us. We'll be asking things, what is your vision for public art in Sandusky? What is your vision for Sandusky in general, so that we can begin to understand how public art fits into that larger vision. And then those stakeholders will also help us understand how the public best interacts in a public meeting session. So we're public art planners, and we like to call ourselves creative, so we don't like to host public meetings in settings like this. We like to host them at coffee shops or at a pop-up park or on a walk. And so we like to invite the public to come and participate and think about public art in those types of settings, because we feel that creativity is often best able to be expressed in different settings than a traditional public meeting. So we'll ask the public what kinds of public art they'd like to see. So think murals, sculpture, maybe utilizing historic buildings to showcase light so they're not damaging the historic character of the buildings. Temporary shows, a sculpture on loan program like one of the speakers mentioned before, that could be one of the solutions. And then after we collect all of that information from the public, our team spends time thinking about what the best conceptual projects and programs could be to fund. So it may be that we want to go for a large grant opportunity, and in order to do that, we need to have some projects or programs to fund for these grant opportunities. And so utilizing all of the public information that we collected, we'll develop some of those programs that are unique to Sandusky. But that will also help us understand what types of policies need to go in place. So what's the governing structure of all of the money that will be coming to public art? How do you maintain any public artworks that are commissioned by the city? That's something that's very important given the weather in Sandusky. Who maintains it? How is it paid for? How often is it maintained? And then how often are people outside of the maintenance department coming in to help with that maintenance? And then the gifting piece too. If someone is donating a piece of art, how is that going to be maintained? Does it then fall on the city to maintain something that they never commissioned in the first place or spend any money on? And then all of that kind of comes into a plan, and they look like this, and I'm able to pass these around if you'd like to see them. And the plan has all the policies, it has all the projects and programs, as well as some implementation steps to guide the program for the next 5 to 10 years. Does that answer your question?
Should we be hurt that she doesn't like coming to meetings like this?
At the very beginning, you had two parts to this. Who are the stakeholders that who have you decided, or how is it decided?
We
Who
give
the stakeholders are, they're gonna basically give form to this, to which everybody else is gonna kind of vote whether they like it or don't.
That's a great question. So we kind of give a general list of people types. So business owners, students, high school. We definitely want youth to be involved, high school students or middle school students. We usually go into the high school or middle school. All of you will be interviewed individually, many of the staff members, and then any members of the public who are involved in any types of arts and culture, anything in the city. So the theater, if there's a Main Street board, anything like that. Anyone you want to be involved can be involved. There is no list currently. It's just kind of these are the types of people that we would engage. And it'll be up to staff as well as you to kind of form that list. So if there are people you want us to talk to, send them our way.
Additional questions or comments, commissioners? I was happy to hear that you had a maintenance piece in there.
Yes.
Or to read that as well, because I know that's been a downfall of art programs in many other cities, and a lot of those cities are now saying, well, we should have thought of that earlier.
Right.
So if we think about that at the beginning, that's a great value.
They're finding it cheaper to remove the pieces of art than it is to maintain and fix those pieces that they never established policies to maintain before, which is interesting and also a sad oversight by those cities. So.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have the 2018 budget and general appropriations that are going to be presented to us initially tonight by Mr. Whoopser and Mr. Solway. So I assume you two will have some tag team approach.
I'll be the opening act, how's
Okay,
that?
all right.
I'll keep it brief. So basically, usually my discussions revolve about what is a budget, why budget? The reason we budget is we have endless demands for spending with a limited amount of resources. It's no different than the dilemmas we face at home, same dilemmas we face here. We have an infinite demand of things we want to do, but we only have a certain amount of money to do it with. So how do we do that? How do we decide? Well, we have to prioritize. And the way we prioritize is the legislative body basically sets the policy that's going to outline the overall goals and objectives. And how was that done? It was actually done by this commission that's sitting here today. In January 2016, you guys unanimously adopted the Bicentennial Strategic Vision Plan, which I'm holding here today. This is our blueprint. Basically everything we talk about at the department level, staff meetings, we want to make sure everything ties back to this document at some point. And just to remind everybody, the 5 main priorities of this plan involve making Sandusky a vibrant city, a livable city, a connected city, a destination city, and in our bicentennial year, a celebrated city. So our budget here tonight addresses all 5 main priorities of the strategic plan. Now just a few comments for me about the numbers. What's being presented tonight is a balanced general fund budget with the anticipation that we'll be adding to the general fund reserve at year end. We're estimating our reserve to be at about 20%, which falls in our target range. Some of the highlights on the revenues this year, which we're expecting to total a little over 24 million, which is an all-time high, include modest increases to the revenue projections for income tax, admissions tax, lodging tax, and also in our investment income. Total general fund expenses are estimated to be close to the same amount of about 24 million, but like I said earlier, we're projecting about a $46,000 surplus at year end at this time. The Finance Committee had unanimously recommended approval of this general fund budget at their February meeting. And basically in closing, I just wanted to remind everybody that we feel we're presenting a balanced general fund budget that meets the goals and objectives of the strategic plan that this body here had adopted in 2016. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Woopser.
Thanks so much, Swoopser.
Hank did a really good job covering the what and the why and the dollars. I'm gonna get a little more into the what as it relates to changes in this budget compared to last year's budget. I've handed each of you a short summary of each of these, but there are only modest changes to staffing levels projected in this year's budget. And that's because we've added staff over the last few years since the passage of Issue 8. We're approaching what is fully staffed. There are only 2 new general fund positions that are new to this year's budget. One of those is the youth program supervisor position, which helps us to accomplish the livable city goal of the bicentennial vision, so that we're taking what was a seasonal position for youth programming that existed only in the summer to a full-time position that will work year-round, ultimately building programs and partnering with entities that serve youth and children in the city of Sandusky. In addition to that, the other new position is a housing programs director position. And with the housing programs which were launched last week, as well as the residential tax abatement program which has been announced, and other initiatives that we're working on to build and fill housing, as well as to promote home ownership in the city, it is getting to the point where staffing that with multiple positions has become untenable. And so for us to be a leader in neighborhoods and housing, as well as to just make sure that we're keeping up with the pace and demand for our housing programs, those are 2 new positions. Other than that, all the positions included in this year's budget that are not currently filled were included in last year's budget. And we've already heard extensively today about the public art program, which is the only general fund program that is new to this year's budget. So it's relatively speaking, from a general perspective, a budget that allows us to continue programs for neighborhood infrastructure, the neighborhood park program, the sidewalk program, the tree program, the local street resurfacing program. All are continued to benefit from the 1.5 million transfer of general fund dollars to the capital budget that's made possible, as well as the economic development programs and the housing programs that were just mentioned. That's a total of $850,000 that's being transferred. So none of the programmatic expenses that Issue 8 made possible are impacted negatively. In fact, they're continued in this, and we'll continue to make those investments. We're just layering in the public art program and there's 2 new positions to help us accomplish our goals. So.
Thank you, Mr. Swoopser. And the document, just for clarification, the document that you just distributed, is that the same one that you sent to all of us yesterday?
Yes. Okay.
All right, thank you. Anything else, gentlemen? Commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mike?
I met with Hank last week, and a couple things of note, and maybe he could expound on this a little bit. The big debt coming off, I'm looking at 2020, about a year and a half out, is the service center. That's going to be coming off. That's a big debt coming off. And then the 27 payroll periods, because I know when I was on before, that's always a tough one. How do you, are we going to sock away money? Was that the plan for that for 2020? That
Yes.
extra payroll is a killer as far as.
Yes, Bob.
So,
Well, we've talked about at the Finance Committee, in 2020 is the year we have that 27th payroll. We have that payroll stabilization fund that we've set money aside for that is, you're allowed to use that. So our goal and our intention is to continue to fund that account so that we feel we have an adequate balance, that once that 2020 year comes, it's going to be, I won't say budget neutral, but we won't have to panic as much as we did 11 years ago when it happened. We'll be ready for it. And then, yeah, as far as some of the debt, the service center debt, which will fall off, as you indicated, that'll help free up some of the capacity for future projects that the city may be undertaking. So those are all correct, yes.
And then our rating was AA.
Yes, our bond rating for Moody's is a AA3, as you indicated, and as many of you know, last year we had a very thorough rating review process where we actually had the analysts come here to town with Matt Lasko and Maria Muratori's assistance, obviously with Eric and Chairman Al Nichols from the Finance Committee. We had a very, very involved process to go through, and they were very excited to see the things that were going on here, and I think our rating shows that we're high quality. Yes.
thank you. Commissioner, additional questions or comments? Sure. Spool.
Debt he just spoke of, the service center debt, how much is that currently? What are we paying?
Currently,
About-
annual debt service is around $700,000 a year.
Okay, what are we gonna be replacing that with and how soon? Are we picking up any debt that,
I don't know that answer today.
anything we're like, what's on the project plan that we have to borrow money for?
Justice Center.
Okay, what kind of money is the Justice Center likely to be worth? We've planned for that at all?
I have no idea what that price
Anything
tag
else?
is.
We've talked about those quite a bit in terms of where the estimates are for the Justice Center. So, I mean, that's been an ongoing discussion.
12 million is what I've heard, ballpark.
It's about right, I think. Yeah.
Be 12 million for the, roughly for the city building?
No.
No, that's not where we're at. That's why I'm, see, all these numbers, I don't try to keep track of them.
Go ahead.
Through the commission president to Commissioner Poole,
Okay,
we're still in the process of analyzing the full cost of the Justice Center, but that is a facility that roughly 50% will be the responsibility of the courts, which would not come from our debt service. And so that $12 million number is probably on the low end of the total project cost, but the cost actually to the city's resources will be less than 12 million based on the contributions that Judge Orzak, or not Judge Orzak, sorry.
I don't believe you have a law degree. I mean, if you did run for judge, if you ran for judge, you'd probably win, but,
Judge O'Brien will pick up a portion of those, and then the city's cost in total for City Hall it's actually around 6 million, but the majority of that will actually be made through the lease payments over the next 7 years, which will not draw down on any debt service. It is that $3 to $4 million in 2026 when our option kicks in. That would be potentially something that debt service from the service center rolling off, and eventually the downtown fire station rolling off would help to offset those costs. But we still believe, at least with the analysis that Hank did a year and a half ago when we were going through this process, is that there is more debt rolling off than there are debt payments rolling on to cover the cost of those new facilities.
excuse me, does the court have any debt service now? Since he indicated the debt service was gonna be added.
None.
So the money that when they kick in for this debt service coming up, what's that money spent on right now by the court money that's not indebted currently?
They allocate a portion of their court costs to a capital fund, so it's under our assumptions that the money they dedicate to their court capital fund would be used to fund the debt
So they spend it
service.
on things to run the court?
No.
No,
There's
or not run the court, but to,
Capital purchases,
for purchases.
computers.
Essentially the money's spent, whether you call it debt service later
No.
or something else, no.
banking
What
it.
what he's.
Yeah, they're
he has-
banking it.
He has compiled a large fund in
Correct,
anticipation of this.
I got
And
that.
the thought is that the bonds that would be sold would be supported by those future the same payment stream that he has today, the fund would go toward repaying the debt.
Correct.
Okay. The key here then is, really what I'm getting at, what's important to me is that we have X amount of debt service, and that's where we were, that's what put us in a position where we ended up laying off a lot of people and not being able to take care of the community. We are now, because we gave ourselves some more money, spending it, some of it very wisely, and it's open, depending on who wants to debate whether it's or not. But by the time we get finished borrowing money and/or doing the improvements to the Justice Center, the city building, and anything else that's not a revenue-generating purchase, it puts us back where we were when there's an economic downturn and started us down the path that we were in 2014, which caused us to raise our taxes. And I just want to be sure that that's not going to turn out. Except debt's coming off, but wait, before it even comes off, we're indebting ourselves for, for bike paths out at the old airport and that project and just other projects, Jackson Street Pier. And whether it's almost as much or just as much as we were in debt for back when we had an economic downturn and problems, it puts us back in the same condition where we can't protect ourselves. And I have some concerns about ensuring that whatever money we spend, that we talk about it in detail about long-term, how we're going to sustain ourselves.
So.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, a couple thoughts about that. One, we'd gone through this process when we looked at and approved the City Hall and Justice Center plans, and we projected what that debt would be and what the debt payments would be. And when we are all said and done, the debt payments will be significantly less than we are paying today. So I think we have a great deal of capacity, and with the revenue stream up considerably because of the additional taxes, but more importantly, because of the additional economic activity in the area, which is what we're trying to do, right? We want to build the tax base, which is happening. I think that we will be more than fine. And then it's also, I know there's a lot of talk about where the money comes for these capital projects, but things like the Jackson Street Pier and the Sandusky Bay Pathway and the new park out by the old airport, those are all TIF funded. But they're not all TIF funded. There is some money in the general budget, or the capital plan, excuse me, our 5-year capital plan. But the largest parts of that are not going to be, they're not going to be reliant at all on the general fund to make those bond payments.
Good.
And through
Mr. Wobser.
Through the Commission President, Commissioner Poole, Commissioner Murray is right in that the vast majority of both the pier, Shoreline Drive, and the pathway will be non-general fund paid for. And we've actually had a discussion with Hank and Director Klein in our last major projects meeting where we discussed even the portion that's going for the pathway that will not be from a TIF. That's that commitment that we've made annually. We're going to work hard so that we don't need to debt finance that, but can actually plug that in on a year-in, year-out basis so that if we did have a recession or something along those lines, we would not be locked into that debt service necessarily long-term. So we're already planning for the future of the pathway. And the good news is the TIFs that we're working on appear to be strong from a revenue perspective that will give us some flexibility as it relates to strategically deploying that $500,000 annually for the pathway without necessarily needing to bond that for debt service so that we again, to Dennis's point and Hank's, we feel like we're going to be in a much more sustainable and stronger position as far as debt, both based on the stability in the real estate market, the continued economic investment and development happening in the city, as well as the decisions we're making as to how we're funding projects that will allow debt to roll off with less debt replacing it going forward. But most importantly, we're being flexible even as we spend the dollars that we're bringing in, which I think is what the community wants us to do. We're doing so in a way that should conditions change through things like succession planning in departments, as well as how we've deployed a significant amount of capital on an annual basis. We can peel those things back for a few years or even, tap into a reserve which exists for a reason to weather those storms without dramatically changing at all the services or programs that we're currently providing to the city.
Mr. Lockhart. Oh, sorry, Joseph.
No, just, I appreciate it. I think the public will be happy to know that you've got this under control. Thank you.
Mr. Lockhart.
In that discussion, I am I'm all for a lot of the projects that we're doing right now. I think it's amazing that we're able to move forward at the speed that we're doing so. But, like it said, in the downturn times, I think we slimmed back from, 300 employees, if I'm reading correctly. But, so that's one of the first things that I look at, is staffing. When we look at safety services, police and fire are the most important thing that we can think about. And now we're doing the work that we were doing when I believe, and I'm speaking of the fire department right now because I'm not totally sure of the police department's level of calls, but the fire department was at about a 3,000 volume call level. Now we're at 6,500. So we're still doing, we're using the same amount of manpower to do more work. And so I'm concerned that we're not budgeting to add more firefighters in, or police officers for that matter, because our first priority is the defense of our people here. And so if there's a fire, I want to make sure that those levels are where they should be, that we have somebody, not just 2 people that show up at a fire, for instance, where we need 3, or however many police officers that we need to make sure that not only the citizens are safe, but the police officers are safe. So, meaning that our staffing levels are correct, and the first thing in a downturn is we start to look to reduce staff. And if we're already understaffed, potentially, then where will we be when we hit those rough patches? And we know that rough patches are coming. And so I want to see how we're going to address that here in the future, in the near future, staff levels. If you have a response.
Through the commission president, Commissioner Lockhart, we continue to monitor staffing levels in every department fully based on available funds, et cetera. We do have an unfilled assistant chief position that'll be filled this year in the fire department, as well as I believe we've added 4 total employees, 3 officers in the police department since the passage of issue 8. And we'll continue to monitor that just like we will with every department. And right now we feel adequately staffed in those areas, but certainly we'll look to add resources as necessary. And I think safety, including in the last recession, is one that you always do your best to protect staffing levels even in a recession. I can tell you that those would probably be the last 2 departments on a chopping block. Were a recession to hit, we'd look to other places first, and ultimately only look to safety as necessary. But we'd have no plans at any time, or nor do we believe we have a situation where we'd have to go backwards in either of those departments at any time in the near future.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make note that Mr. Pohl's concern is very valid, and just to let everyone know, there have been a lot of discussions about debt roll-off and our full debt capacity, and that's why we're moving forward with making those, like compartmentalizing a little bit of issue 8 funds that we talked about a couple weeks ago, but we want to make sure that we have a lot going on right now and a lot of projects in the future, but making sure that we know which dollars are going there and being realistic moving forward with our timelines. So I think that should help Mr. Pohl's concern, but valid for sure.
Additional questions or comments?
I do. I'm not done. I just make sure everybody gets their time.
Okay.
A couple questions. We are showing, in terms of all these numbers balance, and I recognize that, and we base our expenditures on expected revenues. In here, we indicate that the police department revenues are going to increase by almost 30%. What is doing what? What are you guys doing different? The revenues went down this year, probably about $52,000, and you have them going up. What are you guys gonna do different? So where are these revenues coming from?
I'm confused as to.
Those are court fines that are
Those are
generated
the
by the court.
fines.
Yeah, so that's really nothing police controls.
So what you're suggesting then is that the police who did less this year, and the point is this about fines. A police push to increase fines doesn't help the economy. Takes money out of the economy. All right, tourists drive down 250 for about 5 minutes and 20-mile-an-hour traffic, so they're not getting tickets. This is an additional $75,000 you take out of the citizens' pockets. That I think that we have worse things going on in this community in terms of traffic deaths and problems. I don't think that's our major issue. And if the plan to make all of this work involves the police department is going to move resources toward writing more traffic tickets, I would suggest that that's not something that I can support. Additionally, it's the same with the Marine Patrol. A big jump in terms of what they do. They work on weekends when it's really nice outside. And a 30% jump in fines from those folks means a whole lot of harassment for voters. And I recognize, and I'm loose with the term harassment. I just want to point that out, that I'm not sure that that's helping the economy. Money that's being spent by people in the community, at the stores, at the restaurants is good. Pouring it into the capital improvement fund for the municipal court is not of much value. If you'd like to speak to what you folks are going to do, then whatever your plans were to get that up, I'd be happy to listen.
Mr. Soloway, you asked to be recognized.
Yeah, I just didn't want, that's not all 100% fines. A large part of the police department revenues are also for their off-duty work where the city's reimbursed for their time. So I didn't want the impression to be left that that was 100% just all fines. It's part of their number, but it's a combination of both. And we've tried speaking with, Kim in the courts and looking at historical numbers to get a read on that number. And I know they've done some more off-duty work that the city is reimbursed for. So that's partly why you see an increase in that number. I didn't want it to be understood that we were gonna be issuing more tickets or implying that. It's a combination of that, so, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, lastly then about reimbursable money from the police department. It's money in, money out.
Correct. But you have to show
Not
it
even real
somewhere.
money. How does that, okay, then how does that impact the last number where we have a $24 million in revenue? Does it come off?
Comes out of their,
Bottom?
right at the bottom.
Or
So
it's
their
an expense?
expenses are reflected at the bottom and then.
Police department
revenues
expenses.
Comes at the top,
All right,
correct?
thank you.
Additional questions or comments, commissioners? All right then, thank you, gentlemen. We turn now to our regular agenda items, and I would appreciate a motion to accept the communications. Did I miss something?
Just as a point of order, this is actually a public hearing, so
Oh,
need to open it up.
great, very well. All right, is anyone present who wishes to speak to the budget as presented to the commission? If not, then, thank you, Mrs. Cresser. We'll move on to the regular agenda items. Would someone care to make a motion to accept communications?
So moved.
Second.
And a motion, second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Mrs. Cresser, would you present item number 1, please?
Yes, item 1 is the ordinance making general appropriations for the fiscal year 2018. This is a first reading.
Commissioners, having heard this the communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
the adoption of this ordinance on the first reading.
Second.
And a motion, second discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners?
One question.
Yeah, sure.
In here somewhere, the information we get doesn't identify all the projects. I recognize you have that 5-year plan. Apparently made some changes. Is there any place, and you just know what's in there, is there anything in there that's gonna get the basketball courts improved at J.C. Park?
Through the commission president to Commissioner Poole, what is reflected in this plan as relates to the capital plan is a $1.5 million transfer from the general fund to the capital budget. But the capital budget is actually still being put together now for, I believe, passage in, is it April, Aaron? And so you'll be seeing that when it gets specifically into the projects. I can't pinpoint specifically where the basketball courts at J.C. Park at, but I do know that that project in particular, as we have funds for J.C. Park, which could be included in that capital plan, but also that's a priority project from the neighborhood initiative as well. I know that's one that we're looking to do sooner rather than later. And so I can't say exactly where that's at, but that $1.5 million does include, say, about $300,000 for park projects, in which we have a 5-year plan, and the courts at J.C. Park are in that 5-year plan.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. That's generally nice to hear. We have more canoe launch locations planned than I have adult full-court basketball courts for the entire community. And so I'm following your flow. I'm probably going to, I'll decide how I'm going to vote on this now. I've been waiting too long, been asking for this for like 3 years. It's even before you came. And putting in spending as much money as we are on these brand-new ideas that are meant for tourists, when folks improve pass that tax increase to improve their lives, we're getting off base for me. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Professor, would you poll the commissioners on the legislation, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That legislation passes on first reading. Will come up again at the next meeting. Item number 2, please.
Item 2 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a design-build contract with Cornerstone Landscaping Incorporated of Kent, Ohio for the Pipe Creek Wildlife Area Floating Dock Project and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
I
Waddington.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Klein, perhaps you'd give us an overview of, oh, no, you won't. Oh, there he is. Oh.
Yes, I'll try to be quick to get these wonderful people out that attended the meeting today. But as everybody's aware, we have an agreement with the Sandusky Bay Rowing Association. It started in 2013. It's a 6-year agreement. Obviously, by looking at the condition that you'll see in some of these photos that I have on the screen, I'm not exactly sure what was wrong with the other facility, but it was a lot worse than what they have out here. You can see the conditions of this area are wonderful for a park, but they're not conducive to hauling kayaks, 50-foot sculls, canoes, and other type of boats out to this canoe launch. With the high water this year, these mats were undermined. A lot of it eroded away, and you can see the difficult conditions for launching their boats into the water. So they approached me about a year and a half, 2 years ago, said that they were interested in a ramp, a floating dock out at this location. And they said that they would be interested in donating some money to it as well. Initially, they built the pole barn with their funds, and within the past year, they have come up with $10,000 of Sandusky Bay Rowing Association money, and there's also another $10,000 that an anonymous donor has been willing to give to this project. So this project is totaling about $45,000. This dock is just over $40,000, and of that, 25-ish will be coming out of CDBG, and the other 20 will be donations, and those donations are on the city manager's report. What I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Lindsay Schilling, who is the president of the Sandusky Bay Rowing Association, and I've been working with Lindsay for the past 2 years on this, and it's been great. She's been so easy to work with, and same with Kristen Wagner, who's also in the audience up front. Lindsay wanted to talk a little bit about the difficulties that they have and how important this is for their association to grow. They've actually had their numbers dwindle because of the facilities. So.
Thank you and welcome.
Hi, thank you for having us. We've been at the site, like Aaron said, since 2013. We built a pole barn to house our boats. Can I go back with this? The mats that he showed here were just installed last year. They helped in a way to cover the glass and shoreline there to help us give a little bit more smooth transition into the water. However, they are quite slippery. So while they solved one problem, they added another. Most of our members are on the older side, just the way it is. And you can see here we're about waist deep. Sometimes it even gets higher than that, depending on the water level. And to hoist ourselves into our our shell there gets a little bit difficult for our older members. We've had a lot of people say, if you only had a dock and we didn't have to, climb into the boats and get bruises up our thighs and backs, we would come back next year. So this dock is going to hopefully, boost our numbers, which is all community members and supported by our community. So, yeah.
And a couple things I would like to add as well. As you're aware, the area has been a focus of not only the Sandusky Bay Rowing Association, but also the Friends of Pipe Creek. Commissioner Waddington's been out there. I know several other commissioners have been out there as well during cleanup. So the glass that Lindsay was speaking to, those are things. I know there's another cleanup that's coming up, another event in April. But this area, it's a big focus for their association, for Friends of Pipe Creek, for many other organizations, and it's good to have something like this to be close to the Sandusky Bay pathway as well, because this is a future node on that pathway too. So as you'll see in the communication, the materials that we're providing are very versatile. If anything happens, if we need to extend it, we need to widen it, anything like that, we can just clip on additional sections. If something gets damaged, we can replace one section and put on a new one. And the good thing is with CDBG dollars, this is 100% public. But we are going to look to do some things, signage, other things like that, to make sure that motorized vehicles cannot get out onto this ramp. So,
Thank you, Mr. Klein. And Ms. Schilling, thank you for the fundraising efforts that your group has done. So it's really great that you have this gift to make available for the entire public to use. Mr. Klein, you look like you had some.
I don't usually get too many donations in the sewer and water and engineering, so she has the donations with her, and I don't know who those get passed on to.
I think we'll have to accept, I think Mr.
Soloway.
Mr. Soloway may be able to caretaker them for the moment. Until we officially accept it. Thank you. All right, commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Cool.
in addition to the dock, this is a good project, and I was there when you had your grand opening, and thanks for hanging in there till we got it done.
Yeah.
Does this include is the approach gonna be done nicely also, or is it just a dock? And they're gonna still walk in the ruts out to the dock?
Through you, Mr. President. This project is just the dock. We are, if there is some extra money, we're hoping to buy some stone, maybe some mulch, things like that we can do a path down to there. But with the $45,000, we don't have the funds available right now to do the concrete ramp. Plus, this location, the whole Pipe Creek Wildlife Area, is a location that we are looking to do a planning effort for as well. So there will be future projects out there at this site, and I have to anticipate that one of them will be a ramp down to the dock at some point.
Thank you.
Mr. Waddington, see what you've done? You were the one that wandered back there, what was it, 12 years ago and said, we own this?
Chapter there, yeah.
That's right. I'm sorry.
I'd like to get the pathway paved or looked at again one more time, because we cut that several times. We've been down there a lot. April 21st, Great Lakes Brewery's putting the cleanup on down there with our friends Pipe Creek, and I know several of the commissioners helped out last year. It's a fun day. I think that's a great area. We gotta keep the front clean, correct? Or we weed whacked all that out around that building, try to keep that. I hope that we can put more hours in it this year. I'm really happy that we're getting this dock done finally. So, little piece. It's a gym. The back bay is a gym. A lot of people don't realize it. If you have a boat or raft, it's really neat back there. You don't have to worry about waves. It's a vast area.
Additional questions or comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
could Commissioner Waddington share the time on the cleanup?
They don't have a time.
The date is?
It's the 21st of April. I forwarded you that. I don't know if I can.
21st of April. They've started at 9 o'clock in the past, so.
Yeah, I would say like 9 or 1.
Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, just one.
Sure.
In general, I'm really difficult about and picky about what you spend our money on in terms of having good reasons for it, and I don't always agree. But in general, we need to do I believe that is a matter of planning. We need to do it right the first time and do it very well. I hate mediocrity, okay? And as Commissioner Waddington said, we need to get the pathway done. Doing a little bit of something everywhere makes a whole lot of people somewhat happy, but not just this project, but just in general. We are competing with all of the communities on Lake Erie. What's special about us? And it needs to be the high quality that we put into every project we do, and I'm not satisfied with low-hanging fruit and just getting by and saying it's better than it was before. So I agree with Mr. Waddington, as soon as possible, make that a place that people say, when I go in my kayak, I go to that location because I want to use their facility, and that's what we should be approaching every project we do under. If we have to do fewer projects, that's fine with me. My one vote. Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Poole. Unless there's something else, Mrs. Cruster, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 3, please.
Item 3 is a first reading of a resolution approving the petition and authorizing and directing the city manager to execute the petition for creation of the downtown Sandusky Special Improvement District under Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 1710.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the first reading.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Who's presenting this? Greg?
Here,
Ms. Byington?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of commission. What's before you tonight is a request to approve the city to sign a petition to create a special improvement district. It is not a vote to actually approve the district, just to sign the petition, which would create the district. Just for the public, a special improvement district would create a revenue source for ongoing maintenance and for programming of the downtown. This vote tonight would have no fiscal impact on our budget. Tonight, we do have present Alan Griffiths from the Downtown Sandusky, Inc., who hired Fergus Consulting, and from Fergus Consulting, we have Shannon Fergus here, and they are here to present the basics of the Special Improvement District and answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Would you both step to the podium and share with us your presentation?
Thank you very much, Commissioners. We haven't prepared a formal presentation, but we're happy to answer any questions anyone has on the process. Just by way of background, we've been working on this for nearly 18 months now at various iterations. We are in the process now of petitioning property owners in the district, and the petition contains, as an annex to it, the map of the proposed district borders. Based on our initial canvassing of those property owners that we feel are sympathetic or likely to be sympathetic, we are very pleased with the success we're making. We have a number of property owners who have given us either signed petitions or verbal commitments to participate. And we're very confident that this process will be successful pending this commission vote as the year progresses. So in terms of timeline, we'll be continuing to petition for the next month or so. There's a legislative process that would come back to the commission for the creation of the district later on this year if we meet the threshold. The threshold is 60% of property owners of the frontage of property owners in the district have to approve the petitions in order for us to then proceed. And then the district itself would be implemented later this year with funds coming into the Special Improvement District in April of 2019 via the revenue collection process.
Ms. Burgess, do you have anything to add?
No, I am just here to answer questions I can answer for Della Hunt's questions, if you'd like. Let's see, I want to make sure I have them correct. I'll let Alan answer the question about why we have come to you with a petition early on, while we are also still gathering signature pages from the rest of the property owners within the district boundary. But in reference to how to get to 60%, Alan just mentioned that we are working on the basis of front footage rather than square footage. There's two reasons for this. It's easier to track, and it is easier to know. There aren't many counties that actually are able to identify the square footage of every building within their downtown. So we are better able to identify the front footage. The reason that we're using market value, this is an assessment, not a tax. When we first began trying to decide, what property owners would like to see in terms of an assessment and what would be acceptable for them to pay on a yearly basis, we did use the taxable value as a basis. We actually started between 5 and 10% of what that taxable value would be. And then when we presented that within the plan, it is, in fact, we wrote it as total market value. The reason we did that is because regardless of whether a property is abated, they will be assessed on their full value. So if you have a project that is 50% abated, it's worth 1.5 million, they're going to be assessed on that 1.5, not on 750,000. And that's why we're using that full market value to ensure that the auditor, can calculate this correctly every year.
There was a question that was lateral to you.
Yes.
Yes.
So to respond to Mr. Delahunt's question, the intention is that we will petition the majority of property owners. There's not a requirement to petition every property owner, but as I said, we started this process by going to property owners that we had already had discussions with or that we knew to be sympathetic to the process. We will then, as we proceed in the process, continue to have a broader discussion going forward. Clearly, the city's participation is a major piece of this, and so we wanted to come to the commission early in this process to understand the commission's view so that we could have that information before we went more broadly to others in the community. We have started in the community already, and as I say, with the commission's participation, will be a long way towards the 6% that we're looking for.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments? If not, then Mrs. Cresser, would you?
Chairman,
Mr.
I
Poole.
do. Oh, God, yes.
Do you have a question?
I do. No, I don't have a question. It's just, we're doing this. We're supposed to be receiving a petition from property owners, 1710. His questions, we'll take it. I don't believe we should be signing on to this till we know what we're signing on to. The concept of the city signing on to a petition that was supposed to be coming from the property owners is, I don't think it's appropriate. That's not what the law, go ahead. The law will allow you to do anything, but if they just want to understand the commission's position on it, that's one thing. We can give you our opinion, because that's what you asked for. What we're looking at is for us to pass the petition. That's what we're voting on here, that we're going to pass the petition.
Mr. Harris.
I know I read it. Hang on. Keep going and speak to this, and I'll go back and.
No, I recognize Mr. Harris to speak in response to the question that he raised.
Through you, Commissioner President, to Commissioner Poole and the commission and the public at large. I think we're getting caught up on the words in terms of the document that you're actually signing. What we are as a municipality is a parcel owner of multiple parcels in downtown. Your vote today, because the commission has to sign off on us participating. The same petition that if one was presented to the Hoggerfees or one was presented to Murray, the petition's gonna read the same, it's just, you're just gonna take out City of Sandusky and replace it with whatever the parcel. The city commission today, you guys are basically saying, yes or no, do we wanna participate as a downtown tenant in this petition? We can sign the petition, and if they don't reach 60%, it'll never come back to you as a city commission to participate in the city because they don't have 60%. What they're here today asking you to do is, will you sign on, along with other, I'm sure they have other petitions from other entities in their possession. You guys don't have access to it because that property doesn't concern you.
And even if they do hit 60%, it still has to come back to the commission.
Yeah, so after they reach 60%, it comes back to the commission for the actual creation of the district so that the assessment can then begin to take place. So the only thing you guys are being asked to do today is saying, yes, I want the City of Sandusky parcels included in the SID district, and I believe that the SID district is good for downtown. And I think, Commissioner Poole, I think it kind of relays into what your criticisms with and concerns with the Clean and Safe program is that you said each parcel or property owner should take responsibility. This is our way, or I guess the folks downtown's way, of saying the Clean and Safe program is going to be shared. The cost for each individual property owner downtown who benefits from Clean and Safe are going to pay their proportionate share of it, ideally, in the long term. So.
I had an understanding of what you just said. I understand that portion. We're talking about the process that we're going through here. The City of Sandusky, if the property owner, first of all, we don't have a district. You're going to make it up after you, I'm not sure what it's going to be. You gave us an outline in here that shows in red where it might be. At the end of the day, we should be signing on to a petition of whatever it is they come up with, okay? Now, 60% now, depending on how big the property, how big the line is, how big the area ends up being, we could be, and I think currently, with what you have drawn, we're about 30% of it. Of the 60, we're about 30%, we're about 30%, we're about 30% of it to begin with. I don't think a law that was written to allow property owners the opportunity to tax themselves, that we should have such a heavy thumb, be such a significant piece of it before we hear from the taxpayers. On top of the fact, if we jump on board as a taxpayer, that means the taxpayers that have already paid to clean up downtown and do the things that are written in here are now gonna chip in again at the rate that you did, and that's twice. This group shouldn't get two bites of the apple, especially that big of a bite, from the taxpayers in general, because that's really what does. If I'm mistaken about that, as a participant, we will pay what every other participant pays, correct?
Incorrect.
No, okay, good, help me out.
Incorrect.
We don't have to pay?
We voted and allocated a bigger chunk towards the Clean and Safe for 2017. Once they do the assessment, and I think it'll go down to like $2,900 or some smaller number. So we're actually saving the city and taxpayers money by joining the CID if we believe in this Clean and Safe program and all the other programs that the CID can offer. You're actually saving the taxpayers money.
Let me be clear. As a property owner of frontage, we do or we do not pay the same as the other property owners.
It's proportionate.
But we do. We're figured in like them.
We pay.
Okay. The taxes, that is tax money that we will pay that comes from the general fund. Why are we paying twice? The general fund already picks up trash downtown. It already does all of the things. We shovel the snow, we water the flowers with that same money. Now, all I'm saying is, this is a second bite of the apple for that group, of which we represent a significant portion of. The taxpayers that are getting nothing from it outside the district are paying twice. They pay to begin with. Go ahead, keep going.
For the commission president to Commissioner Poole.
Okay.
This commission voted last year to make a grant of $50,000, which I believe is what Director Harris was referring to. to participate in the creation of a pilot program as it relates to bringing clean and safe to downtown Sandusky. I think what Justin was stating is that we do not foresee that grant needing to be necessary on an annual basis. Therefore, the amount that the city would be contributing to a clean and safe program would drop from approximately $2,900 or $50,000 annually to approximately $2,900 annually. So from what we had already voted, or the commission had already voted, that it agreed in the premise of what a clean and safe could provide as far as increased property values and investment in the downtown, we're saving about $47,000 a year from what you're already invested into this process. So we think that's a significant savings. And the reason that the commission voted on that last year at that time was because downtown continues to attract significant investment. But unlike a Crocker Park or other dining destinations where you have a singular owner who builds into the rent of those facilities a rate that ultimately provides for the maintenance, the cleaning, and the programming that is foreseen by a block-by-block program, in a downtown with over 120 property owners, that process doesn't exist, which is exactly why in the 70s, when downtowns were being killed by malls, improvement districts were created to protect business districts like downtown Sandusky from that inability to control the experience for residents. And so while arguably you're stating that we're potentially paying twice, once by virtue of paying taxes and providing services in the downtown, we're paying $2,900 a year to ensure or to protect the investment. And just yesterday on the front page of the business section of the Plain Dealer was an article about a $15 to $25 million investment being made by Cedar Fair in our downtown. We've had over 30 businesses open downtown in the last 3 years. I can tell you that these are investments that are well spent to protect the investment in the tax base, which by far disproportionately provides more tax revenue to the city than it siphons from the city for services in the downtown area. So that's why we've brought this forward, and that's why this commission passed that $50,000 grant, from which this process would save you about $47,000 annually going forward.
Commissioners, additional questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Poole.
If the business owners downtown had come to us with a finished product with those signatures, I would have no objections to participating in it. I see this process as one that is too heavy-handed and being driven by the city with a law that was intended that the property owners themselves initiate. What's gonna happen now, what happens now is the city gets involved and puts their, and it says here, we're approved to execute a petition to create the downtown. Execute to me means that we're gonna be involved in it, okay? Now, we have too much money, cover too much property in terms of being able to impose this. It's the 40% that are not interested in this that I'm concerned with. We have some people with big pockets, deep pockets, that own significant amounts of property down there that can make up your 60%. And when you throw us in there, all of a sudden, the people who may not be interested in are gonna be hogtied and pushed into it. And not to mention the fact, once the city starts passing a petition, with the grant monies that we hold, we're the big bully on the street. If you wanna borrow money, get a grant later, the implication is there that we are pushing this through and on to those folks. If you had simply come to with a completed petition that was signed by people that I could say and feel comfortable was done freely without being coerced by the city's heavy hand, I would be going, sounds like a great idea. But I'm gonna vote no for that reason.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I will be abstaining because, as Mr. Harris pointed out, we've been presented with a petition as well, so I will not vote on this legislation.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lockhart.
Just for clarity's sakes, clarify how this is going to improve the downtown as opposed to what we are. And by that I mean, our downtown has been a relatively clean downtown, relatively safe. I came here from Cleveland, and the downtown Cleveland went through many changes. Certainly having that type of program down there is definitely needed. But downtown Sandusky is unique, a unique waterfront community that has been pretty much free of graffiti and other things. Or, there aren't any tumbleweeds or anything rolling around downtown. But can you clarify for me the need and the difference that we'll see because of this.
Who wants to field that? Mr. Griffiths?
Yes, I will, thanks. Commissioner Lockhart through Commissioner Murray. Thank you for your question. I think we've seen significant feedback from downtown residents and business owners and property owners over the years that actually while you're correct in that we have a relatively clean downtown most of the time, there are particular times when downtown does get dirty, downtown is used heavily, and as we're seeing the economic growth in downtown, that use is increasing dramatically, whether that's Friday nights, Saturday nights, over the weekends for activities. There has been a lot of concern expressed from business owners saying that late Friday night activities, late Saturday night activities impact their ability to do things on Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, et cetera, downtown. We will be providing this year, as you know, a trial of the Clean and Safe program. That'll be starting in May, and people will be able to see the absolute benefits. I can tell you that Chris Parthmore at the State Theater has come to us on more than one occasion and expressed his glee that he will not personally be having to power wash the sidewalks outside the State Theater on a Saturday morning in order to get ready for a show on Saturday night because of the activities on Friday night. The other thing that we're going to be able to provide for businesses is a really visible point of contact with a team of 4 people who will be downtown on a daily basis, checking in with them, acting as a liaison with city services, with the police, fire, and others, and also being able to provide feedback and input to our organization in terms of how we can be assisting them more on a daily basis. We'll be providing visitors at peak tourist times with a visible presence to answer their questions, give them directions, help them find places to eat, places to drink, places to rest, whatever it is, and acting as a focus there. So while when we talk about the safety side, that's really what we mean is providing community liaison. And as you've seen in Cleveland, a high-profile presence on the street for people who have those questions. So that's where we feel there's a huge potential advantage. The city and the city services do a wonderful job, and the greenhouse does a wonderful job, but there really is a lot of room for additional support there, for additional person power when it comes to tearing down and setting up events, when it comes to late in the evening, moving the stage that needs to be moved from the Party of the Plaza back into the State Theater. Those are the kinds of things that we as downtown Sandusky and the stakeholders there feel that we can contribute, and this is a way for us to do that. I would just say that in terms of our interaction with the community downtown and the property owners in particular, we have spent a lot of time talking to property owners, and many, in fact, the vast majority of the major property owners downtown do support this initiative because they can see the clear benefit to them and their tenants from the idea that downtown is going to be serviced to a much higher standard than it has been in the past. Thank you.
Additional questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
Alan, was it a timing issue that you could not roll this out after we had experienced a very successful Clean and Safe program coming up this spring? Was that a timing issue that even if it was successful, you couldn't get this process in place and capture and piggyback off the very next year? Is that where the dilemma came with kind of getting the cart ahead of the horse, so to speak, which some people feel is getting the cart ahead of the horse?
Yeah, Commissioner Brady through the commission chair. There were some sequencing issues around passage of legislation last fall that meant that we had to postpone or delay this process of petitioning property owners and getting the petitions in line for this year. It meant that we didn't have sufficient time actually to pass legislation, run the petitions, pass the legislation for this spring in order to finance the special improvement district this year. So as you can imagine, there's a 12-month delay essentially by the time we get funds from the time that or a 6-month delay, sorry, from the time that the special improvement district is stood up. So to that end, we made the determination, because this year is the Bicentennial, to put the Clean and Safe program, trial program, into this year and to give ourselves some more time on the petitioning process so that we had more time to talk to property owners going forward before we moved into the legislative process.
Mr. Chairman,
Brady.
as a follow-up, thought to that, I know we have some very good downtown property owners. Mr. Delahunt is one. His property is impeccable and maintained impeccably and quite an asset to this community. Unfortunately, Mr. Delahunt is not every property owner we have. So this is a tax on our downtown business owners. There's no question about that. It's meant to benefit everyone overall, though. It's not meant to necessarily penalize anyone or be duplicitous in services. But this is going to, I do believe that this is going to provide a cleaner downtown at a very low cost. I too wish that we had the benefit of seeing exactly what will happen or could happen with the cleaning program that we're going to start as a pilot program. I wish the timing wasn't an issue.
Let's do something else.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lloyd.
I'll be abstaining for the same reason I was approached with a petition, and I would just like to express my extreme frustration with the Ohio Ethics Commission that I may not give my opinion on items that I may not vote on.
Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the resolution?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Abstain.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Ms. Lloyd?
Abstain.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That passes on first reading. Item number 4, please.
Item number 4 is the first reading of an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement for professional services with Designing Local of Columbus, Ohio for the Public Art Master Plan.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
With that,
Naomi,
fine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the first reading.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. We had quite a lengthy discussion before. Are there additional questions or comments? If not, then Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, on the ordinance, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart? Mr. Murray?
Yes,
Mr. Poole?
No.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
that passes on first reading. Item number 5, please.
Item 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a contract with Rising Sun Company LLC of Mansfield, Ohio for the West Market Street Sewer Replacement Project and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman.
Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Got a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Klein, we invariably turn to you for the next couple of items. Could you present this to us, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. President, this is 290 linear feet of sewer that's in terrible shape. Our crews respond to on a regular basis on the far west end of Market Street between Shelby and Pearl. It's too deep for any of our safety equipment. It's too deep for our crews to do the work. So I believe it's the second time we've put this project out there to bid, and we got somebody to do the work. So this project comes in at just over $65,000, and it is scheduled to be done by the end of July.
Thank you. Questions or comments, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Brady.
In 2011, when I first served on this commission, Commissioner Waddington explained to me that this section of sewer was put in when Lincoln was still walking on the earth. And I think that it's about time that we get it repaired.
I think he also told us that it was made of wood.
No, it was late that early.
Really?
Lincoln was exchanging air.
Oh.
Is it true?
It's a good story.
Sounds good.
Unless there's anything further Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 6, please.
Item number 6 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement for professional services with K.E. McCartney and Associates Incorporated of Mansfield, Ohio, for the contract administration and inspection services for the Venice Road Pump Station Improvements Project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 7, please.
Item number 7 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an amendment to the agreement for professional design services with Richland Engineering Limited of Mansfield, Ohio, for the Gartland Avenue Reconstruction Project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Been a motion and second.
Second first.
Mr. Klein, could you just speak to this for a moment, because this is a significant increase relative to size, but I think this is an example of some really smart engineering work that's designed to save us money in the end.
Mr. President, this is the Gartland Avenue Reconstruction Project. We noticed during construction, we knew ahead of time, but we had some significant flooding on the corner of Jefferson and Huron, which is immediately adjacent to Gartland Avenue. And we wanted to make sure that we took care of that while we were in the area. Not only that, but the two water lines that head down Huron and that head down Gartland were both dead-end water lines. So while we were out there doing the work for the design on this, we also wanted to make sure that we looped those water lines so that if there ever is a water main break on either of those roads, we can continue to service those residents.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, additional questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 9, please.
8. Item 8?
Excuse me. Yes, item number 8.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a 3-year agreement with Garner Sanitation Service Incorporated of Sandusky, Ohio, for the rental and service of portable restrooms in city parks, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. I know this appears to be a lot of money, but it is for 3 years. And I had not realized quite how many locations that we have porta potties throughout the city. And now that I look at the list, I've seen all those. I just hadn't tallied them up at one point in time. Mr. Waddington, who's up to speak? Mr. Brady.
I would wonder if, I would ask Mr. Klein to explain to the rest of you, as he so eloquently explained to me today, why this is really not a 57% increase year over year from last year. There's a very good reason for that, and I think the rest of us need to hear that explanation, as do the residents at home.
Mr. Klein.
Sir, Mr. President, last year, the contract that we sent out to Garner was just under $10,000. However, there were other locations that were included in that on a case-by-case basis, such as the Shelby Street Boat Ramp and other places like that. So what we're doing this year is the costs, because of inflation, and we still have that $10,000 limit, that $99.92 that we spent last year was going to go over the $10,000, so we grouped everything together. What was actually spent last year was just over $13,000. So this is just a $2,400 increase from last year, and we are adding an additional one location. We're taking one out and adding two locations to the contract that we had last year. One other item that we are including here is a unit price in case we need it for bicentennial events or other things like that, in case something creeps up that we need to get another unit on at a facility.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Additional questions or comments? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 9, please.
Item number 9 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an agreement for professional services with Rovises of Aurora, Ohio for the Wonderware Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition Software at the Wastewater Treatment Plant, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Hamilton, I wonder if you might take a moment to walk us through this. This is a fair amount of money that we're spending on software, but as you've outlined in your communication, this is just absolutely critical and it's been overlooked for a long time.
Yep. Through you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, this is another one of these cases where the lack of investment over the years is catching up with us. This project will actually bring our SCADA software up to date, so it's more stable and more secure than it is just now. This enables us to have an HMI consistent product across the plant, where we have multiple products at this point. By moving over to a single product, it enables easier support and also enables easier training for the plant operators. This is one stage in a bigger project of bringing the plants up to date. We've already gone through, updated the actual hardware itself. So we're now moving on to the logical portion, starting with the wastewater treatment plant. And eventually, we'll take this over to the water plant as well, so we're consistent across the city. These projects really are not possible without the support of the plant staff. And as a side note to this, these projects are usually painful and seldom succeed without the plant staff. And the plant staff have been amazing through this project to this point. So I just want to mention that as well.
So in the deliverables, so the folks at home can understand what it is that the city is acquiring for the software investment, can you explain it in those terms?
Yeah, so all the computers that throughout the plant control the hardware that let the plant function. It's how the operators interact with the ones and zeros with all the controllers that the function entails. The old software is limited functionality. It's not stable. What we're doing is we're bringing all that up to date, bringing all the latest bells and whistles. We're bringing consistent support and stability back to the plant again. So it's an application for all intents and purposes.
So in other words, if I understand what you've just said in your communication, if we don't make this investment, we are at risk of not being able to operate.
Oh, definitely. We are functional. I don't want anyone to think we're not functional. But yeah, definitely, we are at risk.
Because the software is no longer supported. And if we've got a problem, that's it.
No hot fixes, no security updates.
Okay.
So we're very far behind on this one.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady.
What Mr. Hamilton has carefully cloaked in his presentation is that be ready because we're going to spend that same amount of money at the Big Island Waterworks for software, and I lobby him to get that into a budget as early as next year, because that software was used by Lincoln's secretary. And it puts us just as much in jeopardy as the software does, that you're replacing now in the sewer plant. Is that not correct?
Yep, definitely.
There's nothing more important than reliable software in running both those plants. They are responsible for the life and safety of almost every resident in Erie County.
Through you, Mr. President, I couldn't agree any more, and I couldn't have put it any better.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd? Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item 10, please.
Item 10 is an ordinance declaring a 2006 Chrysler 300 as unnecessary and unfit for city use pursuant to Section 25 of the city charter, authorizing and directing the city manager to purchase a 2018 Chevy Traverse from National Auto Fleet Group of Watsonville, California, for the police department, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
It's been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Now on the ordinance?
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
That item is adopted. Mr. Whoopsie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commission President Murray, Commissioners, audience, and staff. I'll start with the donations. First, a $50 donation to the Police Department Trust Fund in memory of Andy Dunn, who was killed in the line of duty on March 19th, 2011. Was received from the Soloway family. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
Second.
It's been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, Hank, with our thanks, the motion is approved.
A $430 donation to the Kenny Jensen Memorial Tree Fund was received from various employees. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
It's been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks. And that is a really neat way to memorialize a fellow employee. So thanks to the city staff who contributed to that and made that special effort.
That's great. Thank you. Two local companies contributed to the restoration of the Boy with the Boot. American Quality Stripping of Sandusky provided the paint stripping process, and Power Trip Motorsports of Huron provided the powder coating. These in-kind donations are worth approximately $400 per donor, and I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
It's been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks to those two corporate citizens doing the right thing by Sandusky. Thank you.
And while Hank has already received the check, we will make it formal, I hope, by recommending a motion to accept a donation from the Pipe Creek Wildlife Area Floating Dock Project on today's agenda. That was made possible by the Sandusky Bay Rowing Association, pledging $10,000 from their budget, as well as a private donor with a contribution of an additional $10,000. So I'd ask for a motion to accept those two donations.
So moved.
Second.
20. It's been a motion and second. Discussion? That's awesome. And our thanks again to the Rowing Association and whoever that anonymous donor is. Motion is adopted.
Moving on to new business, starting with the police department. The city of Sandusky is offering full testing services for the position of police officer through the National Testing Network. The testing period is April 9th through May 31st. To fill out an application and schedule a written test, please go to the nationaltestingnetwork.com, select law enforcement, and sign up for the Sandusky Police Department. You must register prior to reporting to the testing facility. The closest testing locations to Sandusky, Ohio are Ehovie Career Center and Owens Community College. Also, the 7th anniversary of the line of duty death of Andrew Dunn, killed in the line of duty on March 19th, 2011, is approaching. Please continue to keep his family in your thoughts and prayers. Also, for the last 2 weeks, Chaplain John Adams presented a program, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement Officers that have been hired in 2015 until present, along with the program opened up to other law enforcement agencies. The course topics deal with handling emotional trauma for the officers and their families. We appreciate Chaplain Adams' time in teaching the officers on this topic. Moving on to fire. Chief Wilcox and Fire Marshal Rucker will be delivering meals for Meals on Wheels alongside the Senior Center volunteers the week of March 12th. Moving on to finance, the next scheduled Finance Committee meeting is Friday, March 23rd at 7:45 a.m. in the Commission chambers. Moving on to Public Works, many divisions will be seeking several hardworking and motivated seasonal and part-time employees. Please get applications in immediately to our Department of Human Resources. Also, please call 419-627-5829 for reservations for Palm and Fern rentals. Staff has already begun accepting reservations for Good Friday, Easter, and graduations, so please plan ahead. And congratulations to Matt Wilson for his promotion to foreman and Matt Welly for his promotion to maintenance 3 within the Division of Water Distribution. Finally, moving on to community development, a reminder of grass cutting. Per section 531 of the City of Sandusky codified ordinances, no owner or occupant of real property within the city shall permit their grass or weeds to grow above 8 inches in height. The city published the annual required notice in the Sandusky Register on March 1st, 2018, notifying all property owners of the grass cutting ordinance and the future steps the city will undertake to ensure compliance with the applicable 8-inch standard. Effective January 1st, 2016, revisions to the ordinance took effect, whereby owners of both vacant properties and vacant lots will not be provided a second mailed notice of violation, as has historically been the case. That concludes my remarks for this evening.
Commissioners, questions or comments for the city manager? If not, then we'll turn to old business. Any items of old business? Any items of new business? Two things. I would request a motion to set a second public hearing for April 23rd at 5 p.m. regarding the city's 2018 CDBG program. Would someone care to make such a motion?
So moved.
Been a motion and second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Also, an announcement, we did create the Sandusky Landmarks Commission to consider and make recommendations for inclusion of properties designated as landmarks within the city of Sandusky. Since its establishment last year, members of the Sandusky Planning Commission have served as the official landmark commission, but that was intended to be only a bridge solution. We were hoping that we would have folks come forward who would be interested in serving on this commission. So we are still looking for interested citizens, and you must be city residents, to serve on this commission. And the legislation that we adopted specifically requires that we have among that group of folks people who are professionals or have experience in architecture, history, planning, archaeology, or related disciplines to the extent that those folks are available. Meetings are held at a minimum at least 4 times a year. Citizens who are interested are encouraged to contact Commission Clerk Kelly Kresser by email, and I'm not going to read your email, but it can be easily found on the website.
Link on the homepage, yeah.
It's, or the telephone number is 627-5850. Any other items of new or old business? If not, when we turn to audience participation, anyone wishing to address the commission on any items of city business, please step to the microphone, give us your name and address, and share with us your thoughts.
Sharon Johnson, 1139 5th Street. My number one, I have a few questions here. On the SID, the city's portion is going to be 2,900, did you say? I thought I heard Mr. Whoopser say.
Either Mr. Whoops or Mr. Harris said something, it was approximating that amount.
Okay. The pathway driveway out there in Cleveland Road where we gave a grant of $500,000, a matching grant, cost $1 million altogether. I'm not quite clear whether the city owns that land out there that we got a grant on.
We covered that at the last meeting, it does.
We do own it?
That's what was said at the last meeting, yes.
Okay. And I'm curious here on item 3 and 4. Kelly had down on the agenda that it was going to be first reading. Are you people discussing your votes before you vote? Because how do you know it's going to be first reading when you haven't even taken the votes?
No, that's not the reason, Mrs. Johnson, that it's put on first reading. It's put on first reading because it's a significant piece of legislation, and we want to provide for ample time for the commissioners and the public to consider it.
Okay.
Mr. Harris?
Through you, Commissioner President, to Ms. Johnson, our charter requires all legislation that's not passed under emergency or section 13 be passed under first reading and second reading. So it's automatically first reading unless it's passed under emergency.
Well, most of it's passed under emergency, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And I want to clarify the answer to your question regarding the pathway. There are portions that the city will control and essentially own as a matter of real estate law by way of an easement. But that is, as we had quite a long discussion about that the last time, equally bankable, and it is a form of ownership. Are there other persons wishing to address the commission?
Catherine Carter, 5309 Columbus Avenue. We were talking about the Clean and Safe program. What if you're not part of the 60% that wants to participate? I was at the library meeting about this, and a lot of the people there didn't want to participate in them. They wanted to clean up their own front of their buildings. I talked to a business owner in Amherst, Amherst, and she said that all of their business owners are expected to clean up their sidewalks, their front windows, their front curbs, their alleys, and around their dumpsters in the back of their buildings. They are asked to do it as a city that works together, and it's expected of them. If you have a small little frontage like Barra's, and they can't keep their front clean, then maybe they shouldn't have tables out there. I don't see a mess in front of Daly's, but if there's a mess in front of Daly's and he can't keep it clean, then he doesn't have the right to have the tables out there. It doesn't make sense to spend a whole lot of money. We had, he said there's gonna be people down there that can direct people. Didn't we just spend a lot of money on signage to tell people where the restaurants are and where the pier is and where the theater is? And now we need someone walking around in a yellow shirt to tell people where to go? That seems like an exorbitant amount of money. I think that this city can do a lot better on their own if they just set up a system. They have, as I was saying earlier about volunteers, Vermillion has hundreds of volunteers just taking care of their gardens and their hanging baskets in that city. They're beautiful. They have 40 people, more than 40 people that go down to the beach every morning, clean up the beach. They have a little shack down there. They rent umbrellas and beach chairs, and they sell snacks and sodas, and they raise money to help remodel or restore that lighthouse, including a very expensive lens they put in that lighthouse. Fort Clinton has over 100 of them, or near 100 volunteers taking care of their flower beds, and I think they only, right at this moment, they're only at around 8, but they're busy all the time. Talking about the dorms and the students you want to bring in town, when you bring in 200 underage students and the staff and the teachers and the waste management and the cafeteria workers that you want to take care of these people, how many police officers are you planning on permanently hiring full-time to take care of the put-in-bays situation you're trying to create downtown? Because you should know that now before you start hauling all these people in here that are going to be partying underaged. So we don't have more problems than we've had in the past with other bars with their foam parties and other things. That seems to be, from what I hear, that seems to be a lot of problem down in the Sandusky area, is the undisciplined people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Anyone else? And would someone care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Stand adjourned. All right.